Hello everyone, welcome back to another walkthrough video for Try Hack Me. Today we're going to be doing the Decryptify box. It's a medium box that just recently came out at the time of this video, so let's hop into it. Okay, so first thing we got our box going, which I've got running down here, and just minimize that for right now. Let's come over here to our terminal, and as always, let's do an nmap scan to get started. Simple one first, -F-PN, see what we find. It does find a port 22 open, but that's all it found. So let's extend our search out and see what else it finds. Okay, and for that we're going to use the -PN, so know the server's up. And I want to tell it to do all ports, that's that -P-. And the -VV is very verbose. I want to see what this finds while it's scanning, so that way I can see what it finds while it's scanning, so that way I can go ahead and take a look at the port while it's working on other things. Okay, then right off the bat you see here, there's that port 22 that we already found, and I'll be back in just a minute when we get to our other ports. Okay, so here you can see it's been going for a minute, and it did find this other port 1337, and when I originally did this box on a whim, I just tried loading it, and sure enough that is a web server. So as you can see here, we get this little login page. We got two login options, username and invite code, or login with invite code, and it's the email and the invite code. It's a little different there. There's this link down here to API documentation. As you see, you need a password to get into it. Okay, and I'll look through the source code of all these pages, and I couldn't find anything interesting that stood out. So let's go back to our terminal and see if it finished up, see if it found any other ports. Okay, it does not look like it just found these two. So let's do a more in-depth scan on these two, see if anything stands out. Okay, and to do that, we're simply going to tell the two specific ports we're looking for, which is port 22 and 1337. And we're going to use the -SV to see about getting version information on those ports, and -SC to see if its common scripts can find any vulnerabilities that might be interesting. Okay, so here's our results. We see the OpenSSH is version 8.2 P1, which is kind of common on these boxes, so there's probably not much of anything there. On the server side, the HTTP side, we're seeing we're running Apache, it's 2.4.41, and we see we have the HTTP only flag is not set, and the cookie headers, which is interesting. Okay, since we've done our nmaps, we've taken a look at the website, and we're not finding too many leads on where to go and what to do. Next would be a directory scan. Here, of course, use your tool that you prefer. I like using FUF, so I'm going to get it going. Alrighty, and to do that, I'm going to use the big.txt file, which is what I always start with FUF, and then I can go from there depending on what I find. And we're going to tell it the HTTP, make sure to add that port in, do the /fuzz. And since we know it's running Apache, odds are it's going to be PHP files that's loading the web pages and everything, so I just went ahead and put the extension on there. So let's run it and see what we find. Alrighty, so the results are in. Let's take a look through what we got. I'm not going to worry about this top stuff here. This is API.php. That was the page when we clicked on API documentation. That's the page that loaded. CSS, we expect to see that. It's a website after all. Dashboard.php. This tells us that we've got a landing page after we log in. Footer and header. This is basically just the top and the bottom parts of the web page you saw in your browser. It just loads those. The interesting things that I like to look for is these following: JavaScript, JS, logs. PHP admin can be interesting if we get a login. There's actually anything there. Most time it's basically just some documentation that's there, which for us here, we're going to focus on these JavaScripts, JS, and logs. Let's go take a look at the logs first, see if there's anything interesting there. We get this app.log, and when we click on it, you can see we get some interesting information here. This apparently logs any interaction with the website that goes on. So we see there were some login attempts, and here there was a login attempt from the index with the invite created, and we get a base64 code. Since it's got the this has got equal signs after it, often we'll just jump to assume those are base 64, possibly 32, but most times 64. And we get the email alpha@fake.thm. Jot this information down. Okay, we see here, got to the dashboard, and they deactivated that email, so odds are we're not going to be able to log in with this, and then created a new account using the email hello@fake.thm. Make sure to drop that down as well. So real quick, we'll just copy the 64-bit right here, clear this out, do echo, paste that in, pass it to base64-D to decode it, and we get this number here. So if we take this number, we come back to our index, and if we go to log in here, since we have an email, paste in that code, we see that the user can't log in because it's been deactivated, just like we saw in those logs. So we have some information, but to see what can be useful and what we need to do, let's go take a look at those other directories. Let's start with the JavaScript first. Okay, and we get a forbidden. That happens sometimes. So let's go take a look at the JS folder. Okay, we do have some JavaScript here, and API.js stands out. One, because it was modified later, and two, it is a bit smaller, 723 versus 76 kilobytes. So we click on it. Off the bat here, I'm seeing this list here, and my first thought is, could these possibly be strings for password logins? So basically all I did here was just take these one by one and attempt to log in with the newer email to see if anything took. So I ran through and originally I ran through and checked. None of those codes worked on these pages, but when I came to API documentation and I took one of them, I was able to get in and see this. And I won't show you which one it was. I'll leave that to you to do the legwork there. But this code, come to find out, eventually becomes very important. So what we're going to do is just take this, copy it, and paste it into a file. And so I'm just going to open up Nano real quick, api.php, because this is PHP code. Remember, that's what all these websites are loading with. And then we've got it in there. And so basically, I'm still kind of new to PHP, to be honest, when coding like this. And so I imagine a decent amount of people are. So basically, to kind of walk through what's going on here, and let's go ahead and get our formatting correct here. So to walk through, we have a function here at the top, so we'll get to that in a second. So we have this variable being declared here called seed value, and it's going to run this function up here and pass an email and constant value to it. The seed value gets ran through MTS random, and then the variable random is going to be set equal to the return value of that, and the invite code is going to be base64 encoded of that random that we get. In the log file, that base64 code we saw was the result of all this. And all this function does, is very simplistic, is it gets the strength length of the email, and it does the hexadecimal, which in PHP I'm not quite sure how it works. I imagine it's probably similar to how you can do this in Python. But basically, it just gets a hex version of the email. Then for the seed value, it gets the hex value of the email length plus that constant value that's passed plus the email hex, and it returns that. So that's just a very simplistic high-level overview of what's going on here. If you want to understand more nitty-gritty what's going on, definitely go look up these terms, hexdex, MT-SRAN, MT-RAN, to understand more of what they're doing. So we're just going to save this. Okay, so we've got some code. We've got some bits and pieces of information. We've got 2 emails, 1 invite code. We have a list of potential passwords of some sort. The one we know can get us into one spot on the web page. What else can we do with this information? This was a little hard to get the next step for me, I will be honest. And I had to do some digging, but I found that there are some tools out there to help you calculate seed values from the MT-RAN in PHP. Apparently it's not very strong randomness to it, so they're able to reverse engineer it. And the one tool that I came across that seemed to work best for this was OpenWall Project PHP MT Seed. And of course, all these web pages I'm going to show you, I'll leave links down in the description, so don't worry about it. And you can read over here what he's talking about and how to use it, what's going on. But basically, you want to click up here on code, and I just download the zip. You can click this if you've got Git installed and you just want to do Git clone to pull it. But all I did was take the folder from the downloads, pop it into my folder for this box here, and then in your terminal, you just change into it, and then according to his documentation, all you gotta do is just run the make command. And as you see, mine's already up to date, but if you notice here too, just to point out, he does say you will get an error, but not to worry about it. So of course, make sure you give executable permission to the file you just made, just to make sure it has it. It should have it when you compile, but just go ahead. Okay, and what we're going to do is run this tool, and we're going to feed it that first set of numbers we found, that string that we got from the base64 code, because that is a password that we know worked with the account, or the invite code that worked with the account, I should say. And we want to see if we can try to find what the potential seed value of this was to get started. Alright, and we are back. It's finally done, and it looks like it was able to find 9 seeds that give us this value from random that we have. So basically, if you're curious what we're doing, so I realized I didn't take time to explain it, we're basically going to walk backwards through that API code we found. Remember, the end result is a base64 random value. We've already reversed that by decoding it to get the string that we started here, this seed up here. So basically what we did now is ask it what values will give us that same seed number that we have. And so we've got these 9 potential seed values here. So now the next part can be a little tricky, but I've made sure to break my code up in the different steps so I can show you what we need to do on each part. So for here, we're going to be taking the script that we got from the web page and we're going to modify it a little bit. So we're going to set our email value to the alpha at fake.thm. And we're going to set a lower and upper. And if you looked at those seed values that you got, you'll see that the lower one is going to be that first seed we found, and our upper is going to be that last seed that we found. And what we want our target to be is what the unencoded base64 string was. So what we're going to do is a for loop. And this is where I had to do some learning because, like I said, I'm new to PHP coding, so I'm not familiar with all the syntax and everything. And so for that, I like to use w3schools.com. And I found on their PHP section, they do have a thing over loops here so I could understand how I needed to lay things out. And this is a great resource. If you're learning pretty much any programming language, HTML to JavaScript, I use this for SQL when I really took a deep dive on learning it. Python, Java, you see they've got a list of stuff up here and they got stuff constantly over to the side. Come check them out. Completely free resource. You don't have to sign up if you don't want to. But everything on this website that I recommend to people is absolutely free. It's a great resource. So back to our code. So what we're wanting to do is set our constant value to the lower value first. So we're setting constant value to this first. And this part of our for loop gets executed once, so the first time it runs. And then our second statement here is the condition for the for loop to continue. We're wanting to see if constant value is equal to or lesser than our upper value. And then each time the loop finishes, we want it to increase that constant value by 1. And then inside our loop, we're going to run that seed value calculation where we pass the email and the constant value to our function. And when it returns, we are going to run it through the empty strand, run it through the MTSRAN, and then we'll run it through MTRAN to get our random. And then instead of encoding it here, the forward slash is how you comment things out. We're going to evaluate if the random equals the target, and if so, we want to echo out or print out in the terminal that constant value that we found, and then we will break this loop and the program will cease to run. And to run it, if you're on Kali, simply all you gotta do is do PHP and then the name of the file, and this will run. And this will take some time, so don't worry about it. Go grab you a drink, go stretch your legs, go outside and see the sun for a bit. I'll be back when this gets done. Alright, it's finished finally. I got the last half of this blocked off because I do want you guys to go through it. Don't want to give you all the pieces. So this is going to be the constant value that it believes is what's getting that random value. So we're going to take that and copy it into our next bit of code to see if we can finally get the invitation code for hello. All we're going to do is set the email to hello@fake.thm, set that constant value to what we found, and then just run it from there. We'll go through, and we do want to get that base64 version of the invite code, because that's going to be the code that we can actually log in with as a 64-bit version. So we exit out, and we'll run this to get our invite code. Alrighty, so we'll just take this, copy it. Now it's important when we come back to the website to remember to do login with invite code, and we'll do the hello email, paste in that invite code. We paste in that invite code and hit login. So we type in the correct email address, hello@fake.thm, paste in our invite code and hit login. Now as we can see here, we get a prompt. We can see that we're here as a regular user, and the admin, the other email we saw, is indeed the password, and we get our first flag here as well. So go pop that in, come back, and we'll work on getting that second flag. So where do we go from here? Doesn't look like on the surface we have any way to do user input to do cross-site scripting, an LFI, or anything like that. So what do? Let's go take a look at the page source code. Okay, as we look down through here, you notice that down here in our footer area, we have a hidden type of a date variable, and it has this interesting looking value. Now I ran through using cyberchef.io, wasn't able to reverse this value to see exactly what it is, but I do know one interesting trick that if we come here and we load up our inspect, we can come down the footer and there's that information. We can just double click here on type, just backspace and leave type blank, hit enter, and then you can see we have the code down here. Now what's interesting now since we've done that, since we found a variable on the page, is we can do question mark date equals, and we can just put something like hello. Ah, this is interesting. So it runs a decrypt function and is expecting at least 8 bytes. That is interesting. You see, we get a padding error here. Very interesting. Simple things on inputs can reveal all sorts of things. So for here, if you saw my video that I posted up a few weeks before this about learning to research, that's where this really comes into play here. And I think that this is where the box becomes a medium box. It can be difficult for people. So the way you want to go about searching for this is you want to search for PHP padding error, right? That's the type of error that we got. And when I did that, I was looking around, I came across this posting on Oracle forums of all places. I just didn't connect PHP and Oracle in my brain. And it talked about a padding problem, not related to what we're dealing with here, but it's important because that gave me an extra bit of information I could throw in my searches. Oracle. So then I typed in Oracle padding vulnerability, and I was able to stumble across this Wikipedia article called Padding Oracle Attack. And again, I'll leave a link to this in the description. Found it interesting. It goes over the idea of this attack and how it works at a high level and everything. So I thought, okay, so there is an attack vector here. So then I did a search for Oracle padding vulnerability again, except this time, if you know about Google dorking, I'll show you it here. I use the keyword site and told it just look for GitHub, because if I'm looking for vulnerabilities, majority of the time I'm going to want to look for some open code out there, usually on GitHub or something like that. The first one here that pops up, it's been archived. And as a general rule of thumb, I don't like to touch code that's been archived on GitHub. But this second one was very interesting, and I have it here. It's not archived and seems fairly well documented. I think the person did a good job here. So this was the tool I ended up using. Now to get it, we're just going to go with the first recommendation here, the latest release. You can click here, and this page loads depending on which system you're using, Mac, Windows, Linux. He's got some files here. Since we're using Kali here, I want to grab this Padre Linux AMD 64. And when I got it to my folder, I just renamed it Padre, gave it the executable to make sure I could run it, and this is where it gets a little interesting. So we come back here, you see the basic function here is use the U and provide the website, and then you can provide a cookie, and then you provide a payload. But notice the payload is encrypted. We have a website, what's our cookie? Well, if we come back over here, not to the page source, but to our inspect. Now I'm in Firefox, keep that in mind, so it is different between Chrome and Firefox, and storage here in Firefox, and when it loads up, you'll see we have a session ID. We also have a role here, and I did try to use Padre to kind of reverse or see if it could decrypt this. So maybe I could change some attributes and reload it to try to pivot into admin, but I wasn't able to. If you're able to do that and have any luck with it, post down in the comments talking about how you did it, the command you used, the tool you used. I'd really be interested if anybody was able to do that. But for us, what we want to do is grab the value here. And remember, since we're in PHP, it's called PHP SESSID. A little different there from what the README has on his GitHub. Okay, so if we're following along with just the basic use of this tool, this is the type of command you would expect to type in, and if you hit enter, you see we don't get anything out because it's expecting a third argument. It wants us to have some data to post. Well, usually to post data, you've got to have a variable or something you're passing it to, right? So we're going to redo this with including that date variable, and we'll put a $sign here to indicate that's where we want the payload to be loaded into. And now what do we do about the payload? Well, let's open up another tab here. So we know that the payload we're going to pass needs to be encoded. For starters, why don't we see if we can do hello world on the website. So we'll take this, come back to our other tab, paste that payload in, and run it and see what happens. Okay. Interesting. Ciphertext length is not compatible with block length. So back on this website for the tool we're using, if you scroll down, you notice that it has this -enc. It has an encode function. So if we take our hello world payload and try to run it through that, let's see what we get. It will actually find the encrypted payload that works. So now if we copy this, go back to our previous example, and paste that new encryption that we got and run it, you see we get our hello world back. I had two thoughts at this point, probably the same thing that some of you are having. Can we get a reverse shell with this, my first one, or can we just simply do a read file with this? That one's a lot easier to test for, and I like testing for the easy stuff first. Kind of lazy. So let's go back to our example with the encode function here. And all we want to do is cat And if you go back on the Try Hack Me page, you'll see it gives you exactly the file and the path to it that you need to get the flag. That's simply home, Ubuntu, flag.txt. So let's run this and get an encoding and see what we get back. Alrighty, it's finished. I took a little bit of time to get that one. So let's copy that. And just for fun, let's deliver the payload through the terminal and see what we get. Okay, so it does decrypt correctly, so we know it's a good payload. So let's go send it to our webpage and see what returns. And there we go. There is the last flag. Alrighty, so there we go. We got both flags for the box. Overall, I felt it was an easy box. The biggest challenge was just how to research that vulnerability and either understanding ways to structure your search to help improve your odds of finding what you're looking for, or just being super lucky in your searches. Either way, I hope this walkthrough was helpful. If it was, please leave a like and let me know down in the description. And if you find my videos useful, please give a subscribe. I really do appreciate it for everyone who does. And with that, I'll see you next time.